I know people probably think I'm reaching with the Fordham now, Portland. I mean, really picking some really terrible teams the last couple of years, but these teams are evolving. They're growing a little bit. Again, that's why they're under the radar. People are just so used to them being so terrible. But
Mhm.
what I like to mention with Portland is I don't think of them as a Fordham team, who I do actually think that they could have that big upset against a Richmond, a VCU, St. Bonaventure. I mean, they've already won their first 2 games as underdogs against LaSalle, who we just talked about, mentioned that they played St. Bonaventure really tough last night. They had that good win against Duquesne. They could win, but Portland, they're not there. They're just that team that I have under the radar in the West Coast Conference that they're good enough right now to cover those spreads that they used to get blown up by Gonzaga, BYU by 40, and now they might lose by 15 to 10. So when I look at them, as you covered probably against the spread, is they're 5-1 against the spread as an underdog, and they're 4-1 as an away underdog. But what really kind of caught my eye against them was I think it was the Incarnate Word kind of tournament, I guess you would call it, for lack of
Yeah.
better words, because it really wasn't a tournament. It's just 3 teams or 4 teams came and played against each other at their home court. And they played Montana State, who you and I both really like a lot this year.
Yeah, I do.
And they lost by 2 the first time as a 10-point underdog, and then they lost by 3 the second time they played them as I think it was like an 8-point underdog. That's a really, really good loss if you look at that loss.
Yeah.
And then their last game they played was against UC Davis, who in my mind, I had them as an actually really good team in that conference, and they win by 5 on the road as an 8.5-point underdog. So
That's a
this
good win.
Portland team is interesting because they're not great at anything, honestly. They're just average. I mean, if you look at their stats, they're like 180 for this, 150 for that, 130 for this. I mean, so they're literally just average across the board, which when it comes to the West Coast Conference, thinking about a BYU, Gonzaga, St. Mary's coming to their place or them going there, they're going to be a 15, 20, 25-point underdog. And when you're an average team across the board, you can easily cover those spreads. But the one thing that did strike me with them is they're actually the number 1 team in free throw percentage.
Wow.
So in conference play, when it gets intense and physical, and I mean, the games get close or they get nasty, when you start sending them to the line, they're going to knock those down, which is the
Yeah.
difference as we've all seen as the season's gone on is you miss 1 free throw, you make 1 free throw, you cover, you don't cover. So having them be the number 1 free throw percentage team in the country gives me even more confidence that they can cover. But the other thing that really struck me tonight, and we played them tonight, is in the coaches preseason poll, Portland was last place in the WCC, and
Yeah.
San
Oh, yeah.
Diego was second to last place. And they're going to San Diego tonight, and they're a 7-point underdog. Some sites have them at 7.5. So you're telling me that Portland, as the worst team, is 7.5 points worse than the second worst team in the WCC? Now that makes my mouth water a little bit for when they go play Gonzaga or St. Mary's, because that means I'm getting probably 25, 30 plus points. And I think, honestly, tonight Portland could win. Their offense, they just have that chemistry, 4 starters that average over double figures. They can score, they can defend a little bit, they can make their free throws. So, again, I know it's kind of a lot of people think it's reaching for a bottom feeder, but these teams are coming up and people aren't really taking notice to them. And Vegas is still putting them down as they're that really terrible team the last couple of years, like Fordham. So I think there's some really good value in Portland, and you're going to see us backing them a lot going forward, as we have.
Well, okay, so you mentioned one thing in particular which I loved is the free throw percentage. So last year I was backing the Buffs a lot in Colorado, and they were one of the best free throw percenting teams in the country. I think they were like second or best or first in the country, and that makes a difference. If it's a 5 or 6 point spread, and you're making 5 or 6 more free throws, that might be enough to push it to where you cover either as a dog or as the favorite. Um, and now you see in so many refs are so whistle happy, and you see
Mm-hmm.
just endless foul calls a game. I mean, you see teams missing like 12 free throws. Just imagine the difference that makes for a spread if you make half of that. So if you have a team, like you said, making 81.3% from the line, that's really incredible, especially in conference play. It's going to be vital, I think, as well.